What's going on, everybody? My name is Aiden, and welcome back to the NBA channel. Ladies and gentlemen, today I want to look at two teams from the East and the West that brings me the greatest confusion in terms of the NBA upcoming season. Now, we've seen how teams have tried to aim to compete. Some teams have tried to fall back on competing and maybe look for the younger draft capital routes. And then you see teams in the middle that just strike you with big confusion. Or maybe you see teams that were at the top that make trades that make you seem so confused that you just don't understand why they did those things. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I think there are two teams both in the East and in the West that's worthy of this discussion. So with that being said, let's take a deeper dive into this. Let's talk about the two most confusing teams in both conferences in this video. But before we get any further, if you like the video and you want to see more from me, drop a like, drop a follow, and or subscribe if you are new. And let me know what you guys think about the two most confusing teams in the East and in the Western Conference. Do you agree with my take, or do you think there are many confusing teams, maybe more than two out there, that you would like to discuss? So let's get started. The first team, firstly, we should pick a conference here. So I'm just going to take a dynamic pick and pick the conference I would know a little bit better, and that is the Eastern Conference, because the Chicago Bulls are in there. And no, I'm not going to talk about the Chicago Bulls. I've not picked them. The reason why I've not picked them is because I'm a fan of them, so I can understand where it is that they're going, even though it is still confusing. I don't think they're the most confusing. I just think it's a very hit and miss sort of situation with the Chicago Bulls. The first team I want to talk about is the Toronto Raptors, ladies and gentlemen. I look at Toronto and I do get struck with confusion because I don't necessarily think they're a team that has massive draft capital at the moment. But when you look at what their team is set to be, at the best, I think they could be a play-in tournament team. They do have some very interesting players, to say the least. Brandon Ingram is a Toronto Raptors player. Every time I look at the Raptors, I forget Brandon Ingram is there because he didn't play last season. Or if he did, he very rarely played. Not to the point where I remembered it. They still got guys like Scotty Barnes, who's going to be a very good talent in this league. They've got guys like Podol, who's a very decent center in the league. So you've got pieces there for sure. Pieces that will definitely make you tough to beat. Defensively, their team length as well. They've got a really lengthy team. So it's very difficult to stop them. And I do think they're going to pose a lot of problems in the NBA, to be honest. But all in all, I still think it strikes me with a bit of confusion that their team is. I just don't think they have enough to be competitive. But I also don't think they have enough to be a tanking team. So where are they, in my opinion? They're right in the middle. Is that where they want to be? We know the Toronto Raptors are known for making dynamic changes and big changes to their organization when things don't go their way. So that's what they've done. But is these the right changes to make? They've also spent a lot of money on the roster that they currently have. There's a lot of money being paid to a team that I don't personally think are going to be that, I wouldn't say that good. They're not going to be good enough to win championships, in my opinion. Now, they could come out, they could have a really dynamic chemistry. Brandon Ingram could be an all-star. RJ Barrett, Scotty Barnes, they can all find that chemistry, and they could play really well. Maybe they do make the playoffs, and maybe we're all just overthinking this in many ways. But I think that's a lot of big ifs, buts, and maybes, which brings to the confusion of their team. So I think they're the first team that brings me the most confusion. And I don't mean to be disrespectful when I talk about these teams. I just feel like personally, that's where we are at the moment. The second team I want to talk about is a team that made very big trades in the offseason, ladies and gentlemen. And unfortunately, it does begin to ask more questions than answers. But we know about this team. When they find a way, they find a way. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the Boston Celtics. They bring me great confusion, ladies and gentlemen. I was thinking of talking about Miami, but I feel like with Miami, the Jimmy Butler saga, they kind of will force themselves into that situation. But in many ways, Boston will force it to this situation as well. Unfortunately, with the Jason Tatum Achilles injury and the second tax apron that every team kind of has to think about when they think about making teams and creating teams and keeping teams around, it is a very unfortunate situation, and they were kind of forced to break up a team that did win a championship not too long ago. My only issue is there were certain things that they didn't need to do. I don't personally think they needed to trade Drew Holiday, for example. I understand why they did it. Unfortunately, injury prone. They got a decent player back as well. It's not like they got nothing for him. But again, it takes that championship quality a little bit down a peg. And then they traded Porzingis, in my opinion, for guys that are nowhere near his level, in my opinion. Just humbly, I'm just going to say that. I just don't think they're anywhere near his level. I get Porzingis was injured last season and he couldn't play in the playoffs. and maybe had to think about, extending him as well. But they were forced in a very bad situation. And now I look at their team as, well, they're not going to be competing this season. But what are they going to look like when Jason Tatum does come back? I think Jason Tatum is young enough to recover from an injury like this. Even if he's not completely the same, I think he has the skill set to make a difference in this league. So I feel a little bit questionable with the Boston Celtics because it looks like they've thrown the towel in already, it seems, before Jason Tatum has even come back. And that brings great confusion to me. But again, Boston are a team that could figure it out. They always make moves. They will take risks. That's the one thing you can respect about the Boston Celtics. They will make the right moves. They will take the right risks to get them closer to competing for a championship. When they're down in the gutter and when they're a bad team, they're not a bad team for a long time because they are very smart with their decision making. So what looks stupid now or what looks foolish now or what doesn't look interesting now could turn into a very interesting prospect in the future. I'm looking forward to seeing what Boston does, but for now, I'm in that confused phase, and I think they're the most confusing team, one of the most confusing teams in the league. So those are the two East teams. Let's take a look at West, ladies and gentlemen. And firstly, there's a team that strikes me as the most confusing team in the league, and I mean that for both East and West. That is the Sacramento Kings. I mean, I kind of feel sorry for Sacramento in a way because they had a team, I know they traded for DeRozan, but they had a team there that was looking on the rise. And, they had the whole Light the Beam movement, and the Sacramento fans are literally crazy. They're unbelievable fans, and they deserve some success in their history. They really do. And then, unfortunately, De'Aaron Fox kind of said he wasn't going to come back, so they traded him to the Spurs. They got Zach LaVine, and now they just look like the Chicago Bulls 2.0. And I know this as a Bulls fan. We had DeRozan, we had Zach LaVine, we had a center, obviously not Sabonis, but we had Nikola Vucevic, who plays roughly, a similar way to Sabonis. Not as good, but still roughly similar. Sabonis is a better player. They didn't have much of point guard help. Lonzo, unfortunately for us, was hurt. They didn't really have much point guard help. And to be honest, it was the exact same outcome as it always has been with the Chicago Bulls. They didn't have success. They fell away. They fell behind. And I just don't know what they were thinking to go down that route again of bringing two guys and bringing a team that was very similar to the Chicago Bulls team that didn't work. Why would they try to do that out West? And I kind of feel like they were forced into it once again, but it brings confusion. And if I'm Sacramento, I think you have to make some changes into the team. Do I think they are good enough to be talked about with some of the best West teams? Respectfully, I just don't think they're that good compared to some of the West teams. I mean, if you think of the West and how dominant it is, you got teams like, we could start from the very top. The OKC Thunder. You got teams like the Houston Rockets. You got teams like the LA Clippers and the LA Lakers. You got teams like the Denver Nuggets. You got really, really stacked teams out there in the West. And Dallas, there's so many great teams out there, and I'm sure I'm forgetting some. The Spurs could potentially be another one on the rise. There are so many great teams out West that pretty much 1 through 10 is just a tough battle, a tough fight, tooth and nail to the very end. And Sacramento, in my opinion, are not better than most of those teams. So I feel it's unfortunate to say that. Maybe they could prove a lot of people wrong this season, but to me, they're very confusing. I don't really know where their direction is, and I don't know what path they're taking. So they bring confusion to me. And the last team I want to talk about, to be honest, with this team, it's more the decisions they've made, and I actually don't hate their decisions at all, but it does bring questions about what they're trying to do, and that is the Portland Trail Blazers. The reason why I feel like they're confusing is because they had a good young core. They had a great young core last season. They had really good games, some iffy games. Of course, they're not great, but now they've decided to go for Damian Lillard, who's not going to play this season, and Jrue Holiday. They've traded for Jrue Holiday. So, two players, veteran guys, that I'm assuming what their plan is, because, again, these guys are getting paid a lot of money, especially Jrue Holiday. The plan probably is to get these guys to be the experienced guys, the veteran leadership in the locker room that's going to get this young group to play the right brand of basketball. That, to me, makes the most obvious sense. But you also got to understand, this is still a young group that probably needs more draft capital and needs higher picks to really get to the places they want to be in the NBA. And that brings confusion to me because assuming in 2 seasons' time, Damian Lillard does come back and Jrue Holiday is still there and they do all the right things and whatnot, they're probably going to be a good team. Probably still not going to be a championship team. So, in my opinion, where they're heading right now, in a few years' time, is smack dab in the middle of the league, smack dab in the playing tournament. And to me, again, as a Bulls fan, we all know this. The playing tournament is probably the most confusing place to be in the NBA because you don't know your trajectory. You don't know what your future is going to be. You don't know if you're competitive or you're tanking. You just don't know the answer to that. And I feel like Portland is heading in that direction, unfortunately. I still don't hate their moves. I definitely don't hate the Damian Lillard move because for 13 million, if he can come back remotely to what he was good at, that's a great, great bargain for the Portland Trailblazers. And Dame goes home. And then at the same vein, Drew Holiday is one of the best defenders in the league, and he could help teach these young players how to play some great defense. And I think that could be a very valuable asset to have as well. So I don't hate the moves, but I still think they're questionable moves to say the least. So those are the two teams that I think bring great confusion to the West and to the East. I'm sure there are very big honorable mentions, like the Miami Heat, like the Chicago Bulls. I think both of those teams bring great honorable mentions. The Indiana Pacers as well, to me, is a very confusing situation for them. Out West, the Clippers, I think are very confusing. Because I don't, it's more about the style of play than anything. I don't know how they're going to play. So there's confusion there. If LeBron James doesn't come back, the Lakers will be a confusing team. There's many confusing teams in the league, but I think these are the obvious ones at the moment that make me question things. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Stay safe, stay healthy, and stay tuned for more. Take care and peace.